Hi, Julia. Hi, everybody. So, obviously, there's a line for the food. Stay in line if you want food. Thank you all for coming. We're going to open the show in just a minute, or in a few minutes. But first, we're going to have Professor Wang is going to speak about the concept and about his year here and a little bit about the show. And then Liang Wang, who's our fellow this year, is also gonna make some comments. So I just want to make a few opening general comments and turn it over to them, and we'll take a few questions also from you. So this is the fifth opening of a show by one of our Boghosian Fellows. This is the first live one we've done in 3 years. The last two we had to do completely online. I'm going to just read something quickly here. So I don't need to read it actually. So we have a fellowship here. It's the Harry der Boghosian Fellow. We have one every year. Liang Wang is the 21-22 Fellow. And Liang Wang is the 2021 Fellow. We had 3 before that. The fellowship was established 6 years ago. It was established in the name of Harry der Boghosian, who was a graduate of our school. And also, it came from a gift from his sister Paula, who was very involved with the exhibitions that we've done up until recently. We hope she'll be able to visit this one. She's visited all of the ones in person. She provided a gift. It's the largest gift to the school of any donor ever. It's the largest gift to the school. And the gift provides funding for the fellow to spend a year with us. They typically teach a seminar in the fall, a seminar in the spring. They do a symposium or a lecture, and then they do an exhibition. Now, Liang Wang's exhibition was delayed for obvious reasons. We couldn't do it last year, and so we decided to move it to the fall. So it opens tonight. It's been it's more than a year, almost a year and a half. Some of you may have been in his courses over the last year, in his seminars and studios. And many of you helped to build this exhibition. I'm not going to say very much about the exhibition because I will tell you everything about it, and then you might not want to go and see it. So I'm going to resist. I think it's a terrific exhibition. It's an amazing model. There's a lot to say about it. I think you'll have to see it in person. But I'm going to just maybe make a few just general comments about it. Liang, this last year, or over the course of the time he was a fellow, did research on the Superblock. And the Superblock is a term for students and for faculty and for architects and for real estate developers and everyone. Everyone thinks they know what the Superblock is. If I say, Professor Good, did you see that article on the Superblock? He would know exactly what I'm talking about. But he doesn't really know what I'm talking about because nobody really knows what the Superblock is. We use the term very loosely. And so Professor Wang and his students over the course of the year did research on this term. And they came to understand exactly what I just said, which is it's not really a typology, it's not really a term, it's not really a thing. They came to the conclusion that the Superblock is a name for our attempt to represent the entirety of the city. And with that attempt comes the impossibility of doing that. And in a way, this show illustrates, especially the model, the necessity to try to illustrate or to represent the entirety of the city, and the impossibility to represent the entirety of the city. And as students, you will, if you haven't recognized that already, you will soon know that we are compelled to want a complete and total view of the city, but we are also, at the very moment, we're compelled to know that we can never have it. And our ambition is forever to try to get that and always to be thwarted. In a way, this model tries to illustrate that. And Professor Wang is going to tell us a little bit more about that. The last thing I'll say is before, as you go in, or at some point, you can use your phone and shoot the QR code, and you can get the only plan view of the model that is available, and that comes from a camera that's mounted above, because the model is too tall to see the plan. It's too tall to see it from above. So what you get are interior views, architectural views, and through the architecture and through the interior, you can see the block and the urban scale, but you can never really see it. You can't see it fully. And the closest you get to seeing it fully is through the camera from above that you can view on your phone, but it's also projected on the wall. So I promise not to tell you everything. I'm failing miserably because I'm trying to tell you too much. I won't say any more except we're thrilled to open this tonight. Very happy you're here. I'm going to give it over to Professor Wang, and then he's going to give it over to Professor Critic, and they'll talk a little bit about this, and then at some point we'll open the doors and you can go in and see it. So help me give Professor Wang a nice round of applause.
Wow, thank you. Thank you guys so much. I'm just purely thrilled and by such a big crowd tonight. And at the same time, I'm terrified because I haven't seen so many people in my past year teaching here. So I'm gonna do my best. I'm getting really nervous now, but let's see. But first of all, thank you, Michael, for that very generous introduction. Michael has been an instrumental figure for my teaching fellowship in the past year. I can give you 1,000 reasons to thank him. But I guess the most important one I want to say now is thank you for allowing me to finish up this project, which I'm very happy and proud of now. And also thank you, Lin, for joining us tonight. I'm just honored. It's interesting for me because this is the first time, I guess, that two fellows we're sitting together, joining a conversation. I'm really looking forward to what do you think about this model and the show. And also, thank you guys for coming out. I know this is a very busy time for all of you, for student and everything, so I appreciate that you guys are here with us. What I'm gonna do is, I know we have about 30-ish minutes, and I know also Michael and Liang wanted to respond or share their thoughts on this project and process. What I'm going to do is I'll probably just situate the exhibition as a project into my trajectory of my interest and research in architecture and urban design, and also specifically my teaching fellowship and research over the past year. But before I do that, I have a few very important acknowledgements to make, which I kind of already did to Michael, so I'm going to skip that. And the second individual I wanted to acknowledge is our Associate Dean, Julia Zerniak, who is actually here. I really appreciate, because last year when I joined the school, it was during probably the worst time of COVID. And I really appreciate that Julia always made me feel like I'm part of this big family. That emotional support has been really instrumental for a newcomer. So I really appreciate that, Julia. And also, obviously, for you sharing all your knowledge and expertise in my studio and my seminar. So thank you, Julia. And also, my very deep gratitude goes to so many individuals that I probably will not be able to acknowledge all of them, but I'm gonna do my best. First of all, our fabrication lab experts, you guys know all of them, John, Bryant, Michael Giannatasio, Robbie Weaver. I'm not sure if they're here tonight, but yes, they definitely deserve it. None of this would have been possible with their support and expertise on the fabrication part. And also to Tug and Andy, I believe they're here, I just saw Tug, for their support on all the digital media platform, not only for this show, but also actually for my teaching during the most challenging time last year during the pandemic. So I really appreciate it. Yes. And also, I want to thank all my students in my class through the last year seminars and studios from 2020 fall to 2021 spring, and actually into 2021 summer, which I actually also taught a seminar and a VC studio related to my Boghosian Fellowship research. So yeah, I would say give them a round of applause for their contribution to this project. And also, I would just personally wanted to give a very big shout out to my amazing production team, Emily Hu and her boyfriend, Miguel Roman. Actually, they're here with their family for their very hard and excellent work on this model. Without them, none of this would have been possible. Thank you guys, appreciate it. And for my research team, actually, Wendy Lee, Roy Zhang, who are actually not here today because they're in Florence, I believe. But hopefully they will be able to see all this after they come back. They have made a significant contribution to the publication, which you also will see in the books. All the drawings, very elegant, elegantly drawn and worked out. So they have really been instrumental to the team as well. And also my earlier research team member, Pang Lin and Tanzhang Lai, and also Rami Moeller. I think Rami is probably here, for their contribution on the earlier phase of research and transcription of the symposium and all the work as well. And last, but certainly not least, I want to thank my lovely wife here, Lu, who is with us. I owe her a lot. I just wanted to say that thank you for allowing me to work on this project. That really means a lot to me. Yeah. Especially during the past 3 weeks that, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional, but it's just, she has been taking on most of the work, taking on our little puppy for the past 3 weeks. So she has been a single mom for the past 3 weeks. I feel really bad about that, but at the same time, I promise I'll make it up after today. And thank you, I appreciate it. All right, so that's my acknowledgements. And I'm gonna spend the next few minutes maybe to really try to situate this project and exhibition and all the ideas behind the production. So the title of this exhibition is called Cultivated Imaginaries, Superblock and the Idea of the City, as you guys can see on the door, which is actually the title of my research seminar that I taught over the past years, over the fall and the spring. And it's really derived from my doctoral research that I'm still working on at Harvard. Hopefully I can get that out in the next year. And as this title suggests, we all as architects, urbanists who, I believe are all very interested in typologies and idea of type. I have been really trying to situate the entire research and my scholarship on the Superblock, if you will, at the intersection between architecture, let's say urbanism, and socioculture studies. And I did that precisely because, as Michael just framed, the kind of ambiguity and imprecision of the term itself. So that's where I actually got started with the whole thing, the research on the Superblock. And when I started my fellowship here, our inquiry on this topic really started was going back to some of the, let's say, widely known and acknowledged Superblock projects, mostly in the West. And also at the same time, we started inquiry back into some of the historical readings and literatures regarding the Superblock in general and its development. But the question remains as to why then does the term Superblock continue to have such appeal and purchase in discussions about architecture and the future city. So in a way that I argued in my seminar and my research that one answer could possibly be found in historian Alain Caron's writing titled The Superblock back in 1971, where he suggests that Superblock really represents the kind of license to architects and to urban designers to creatively imagine the totality of the city. It's a name of an ambition, as Michael framed very beautifully as well. So in a way, this question has really outlined the framework of my seminar and studio and also this exhibition project as a whole. So in a way that we conceptually speaking, we divided, or if you will, categorized the research and seminar and studio into two parts mainly. One is about history or discourse of the Superblock and its development. And the other is about speculation and imagination that really derived from that inquiry of the historical lineage. So that idea actually got translated into the show, as you will very, very soon see. All of them. The two parts actually manifest with relation to this conceptual idea of history versus imaginary and imagination. There are two book publications or book publication of 2 volumes that are basically placed at 2 ends of the room, in the marble room. And they, in a way, kind of collected all the analysis and research on the Superblock development, mostly in the Western context and some in the East Asian context as well. And then there is this centerpiece in my back here, behind the door. That's the model, which basically represents an imagination or imaginary that could never happen in real world. In 2 senses, I guess. One is how you view the scale and experience the scale of space that has been represented in this model. And second is it also at the same time, as Michael was looming toward to, is the idea of impossibility or a kind of resistance about the power of architecture. So in a way, I would frame this model also as a design manifestation of showing or demonstrating that impossibility. And the QR code, the top-down view of the model really is a visual manifestation of that, let's say, mediated impossibilities. And going back to actually a little bit to my teaching seminars in the past year, in the fall semester where I started this whole inquiry and research, we mainly focused on the Western trajectory, let's say the existing literatures about the Superblock and the projects, the practice, the reality of it. And in the spring semester, we kind of turned our attention to the East Asian context where I'm from, mostly actually in China, with a focus in China, not only because of its kind of unprecedented urbanization witnessed in the past 3 decades or so, but also I would say because of the kind of almost like an alternative reading or mode or interpretation of what has not been present in the Western discourse of the Superblock. All that being said, I'm not, through all my research and teaching, I'm not trying to kind of promote this kind of confrontational view between the so-called West and China, but rather I would like to enrich that reading, that already existing literature, existing lineage of this topic. So that's the, I would say that's the kind of a larger conceptual framework where I would situate it, this exhibition project within. In a way that I'm not gonna talk too much about the project, the model and the book themselves, because I want to have you guys really experience it, and hopefully, and that's really my goal, is really to let you to really have some more, maybe more interesting reading than the one that I have about scale, about space, all the kind of interplay between architecture, urban, and interior. But I wanted to say that in a way this exhibition is a spatial, as I just said, manifestation of our conclusion throughout the entire teaching fellowship, which is to say that, I'm gonna just paraphrase Michael's line here, which is to say that a superblock really is not so much of a thing, of a term, of a concept, but it indeed is a practice, is a mode of operation. But at the same time, I think it's also a, let's say, a process of resisting, or an architecture of resistance. That's the way I wanted to kind of frame this whole exhibition and discussion about it from my perspective. So in that regard, just to be consistent with the kind of conceptual framework of the teaching fellowship, in the book, I'm going back to the book a little bit. There are 41 very carefully selected and redrawn, very carefully analyzed case study projects representing the, if you will, the canonical projects in the discussion of a superblock, both in the West and in China. Whereas in the model, actually, as you will see, I'm just gonna say this, there's constantly interplay between scale of the urban, the architectural, and the interior. And that happens actually right here, even before you start entering the room, that experience of layering multiple scales, multiple spatial experiences is already happening. But once you start walking around the model, which I really hope you will do, and if you really see carefully, this wide frame or this wide building also itself is a, let's say, a collapsed entity of different scales, all the way from the bottom level to the top. And the last piece I wanted to mention, or an element of this exhibition project, is the projection on the marble wall, which you probably can see here. Yes, that's the view, as Michael was just mentioning, that you probably would never get to see with your bare eyes. That's the top-down view of the model, and that view, Michael probably would have more words or thoughts to share about that view, because I know he really likes that view, and so do I. I think that really distills all the kind of the resistance that I was trying to show in the project. And lastly, I guess I just wanted to mention that there is, well, maybe I'm not supposed to say this, but Michael will probably say this. But anyhow, there has been a very subtle play between the model itself and the marble room, and I hope you will be able to experience it and perceive it. On the one hand, in terms of the grid, this three-dimensional grid embedded in this model with the floor pattern, that's kind of relatively obvious one. And the other is the material of the entire project, very simple, very constrained, if you will, the color, the use of material. To me, that's also a very subtle response to the very, very extremely rich room in our building, which is the marble room, that has the texture, the pattern, the lighting, and also all different kinds of details. So in a way, I think I'll maybe just, yes, say that I'll stop here for as an introduction for this show and for this project. And I hope that you will enjoy the view, enjoy the experience in this marble room, enjoy this show, and hopefully that I can hear more interesting reading from many of you guys after the show. And thank you. I guess I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Testing? Okay. So Professor Wang, or should I call you Liang? First of all, congratulations on such an amazing show. I know you've put in so much work on this, and it's been such a privilege to be able to also witness you in the process as you were putting the exhibition together, and also just the honor of being right here next to you.
Exactly. I forgot to say one thing, just one quick thing. Ling, she has been so kind and supportive. So when I was in the most intensive period of the production, she would just come in and check on me, making sure I'm still alive in that room behind all the masks. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think one thing that I really love about, and I think this should be maybe practice for generations to come for the fellowship. I think that it really, one of my biggest takeaways also is that I've also gained a new friend in you. So I'm very thankful for that. And I think it is also, I hope in a few months, lo and behold my future in a few months, that that I also feel that kind of friendship and kind of comfort, and also
come back and check on you.
Yeah, right. Bring your dog. So I think in true fashion of your show, where you're also dealing with scales, I'm going to also structure my questions in scale, starting with a kind of more larger scale of the overall premise of your project, down to the scale of the actual exhibition and the model, which of course you're free to answer as in much detail as you want, because I know you want to leave some of that mystery until everyone can actually get a chance to walk around and see the model. So maybe as a start, how can you talk about the role and your understanding of the Superblock and the evolution of that understanding from the time before you arrived for the fellowship, and now having finished the exhibition, and then moving forward as you finish your DDes, and what comes beyond?
Wow, that's a big question. It's a good one. Thank you. I guess as I was making my kind of very brief introduction just now of my interest in this topic, I really I got intrigued by the term itself, because I actually did a thesis on Superblock and used the title, and many other design studio project I used the title Superblock, and so did many of my colleagues. And I thought I knew what I meant by Superblock, and I thought it was a catchy title. But I never really dig into the history and discourse behind it. And two, I got onto this, actually a review with some of my professors, actually my advisor now, Yves Blau, on one review, design review at Harvard, and she really kind of enlightened me about the Western lineage of the Superblock discourse, which I was not entirely aware of. The idea of the Superblock being associated with the Garden City movement and all the way to the New Frankfurt, so on and so forth, in the European context, and then migrated to the Soviet Union, and then some of those ideas kind of were kind of related to the modernization in Latin America. That kind of narrative had really intrigued me into almost the aspiration of fully understanding of what it really means as an idea, as a subject, an urban subject. On the other hand, I think I have been trained as an architect, and then I studied urban design. I feel like my interest always splits between two, if you will, conceptual categories, the architectural ones and the urbanistic ones. So I think the Superblock probably gave me the perfect reason and venue and vehicle for doing that, which is why I think there is a certain richness to the lineage of the Superblock. So that's with that all in mind, I applied this fellowship, and I was so fortunate I got in. But back then I hadn't really arrived at any type of conclusion about, let's say, the research on Superblock. All that has been, let's say, stated by Michael, and also the ones that I was just trying to frame, really came out from the teaching and all different exchanges, conversations with my students, with so many faculties here, and of course, with Michael as well. So really to understand the Superblock not only as a urban typology, but also as the kind of representation of something that is impossible is really, for me, a new line, or if you will, something I really wanted to take on further into my doctoral research. In addition, I'm not sure I'm speaking too much, but there is this discussion that really arises from many conversations when I was here teaching the seminar in the studio with regard to the question of modernism and modernization, which I think the Superblock itself, I guess I could say this, is a modern project, or at least embedded in its very idea. But how we view that idea of modernization and modernism within the context of a Superblock has been something really intrigued me in my studio, actually, many of my students' studio project, and also many conversations, also especially the symposium that I co-organized with Michael this past spring, where the question of modernism really came up. What does modernization mean in the Western context, and how does it really kind of entail, or does it entail at all, a kind of different reading from a more kind of a broad global perspective? That's something I also wanted to take on in my future research and dissertation. Yeah, I guess I'll stop there.
Thank you. And do you think that the Superblock is a representation of the city, or could it be a kind of ambition that could be applied to, let's say, even history, where you say that there's a kind of multiplicity of views, a multiplicity of representations, of perspectives, of a kind of interpretation of what the city is, and when we think of history also, that history is never a kind of determined destination, that it's always being rewritten, that it's always being revisited, and always kind of acknowledging that there are multiple kind of readings of history depending on who is writing that. And so where do you see the application kind of extending as an ambition beyond the city, if possible?
Yeah, actually, that's such a good question. In the reading that I mentioned from Alan Cajon, I think he writes that the Superblock itself is trying to become a city itself at the scale of the urban block, which I think reveals a kind of a dilemma, that the ambition of trying to have everything at a certain scale, everything that could support the life, the social welfare, and everydayness. But I guess the modernists have really failed on that with the kind of the totalization design methodology as an approach. I don't know if I can answer what could be the alternative to that. I think I'm throughout my research and teaching fellowship here, I guess we're all just collectively trying to see, first of all, where can we position the contemporary, or the relevance in this discussion in the contemporary city, and second, if that's still relevant, which I believe so, how can we find alternative in terms of conceiving the idea of the superblock today, or it's just not impossible to do at all. I think embedded in there is also again, I think a kind of resistance of fully completed, of fully revealed, which I guess it's something that I'm still trying to figure out, both as a research topic and also as a kind of teaching endeavor. Yeah.
I think it's also interesting that you emphasize the importance that this is an ambition to see all, but we acknowledge that we will never see all. Yeah. And the interesting part about that is that if you are really to see all, then and you have the power to see all, then it kind of enters the territory of panopticon and sort of surveillance and questions of power. And so,
exactly.
Yeah, and I think...
yes, the social and cultural part has been really important, I think, to this, my teaching fellowship, obviously, the seminar, the premise of the entire studio has been, we're not just studying the projects themselves, but also looking into the context and the social fabrics where these projects were made possible in history. I believe there is a lot to learn still today from those process and research and analysis, which is why I, again, structured this exhibition into two parts. One is really to interrogate that part of the history, and one is much more open-ended, represented by the model, I guess.
And who would you say are your peers from the past versus peers in the present in your research?
That sounds like a job interview question. No, I think there have been so many important intellectual figures to the research. And for example, actually, that's part of the reason why I think the Superblock, as I was just trying to frame at the beginning of my introduction, it's not only a concept, but also it's a reality. It's a kind of a practice, which is why I think projects and case studies and precedents are so important. Knowledge can be drawn from that mode of operation. For me, I think Raymond Unwin, who I think arguably for the first time in history used the term Superblock in his writing, I think called town planning in practice, or new practice in town planning, back in the beginning of the 19th century. And that really associated with a lot of the movements with the Garden City. And then later on, I think the practice of Ernst May from Germany, who I'm sure you all know him, contributed so many important ideas and projects in history in the Western lineage. And also, I think a lot of the figures, some of the common name that we all know, like Aldo Rossi, his view, not so specifically on, let's say, the Superblock, but rather, I think, a kind of relationship between architecture and the city, which I think has always been present in the discussion about the Superblock in history. I don't know if I'm qualified to be among those important figures, but I guess I'll do my best to produce some interesting work. Yes, I guess I'll just stop there.
And Michael, do we have enough time for more questions, or one more? Okay. Well, one last question from me, and then I can open it up to the audience. Can you, I guess, talk to us about, and you can reveal as much as you want, but the relationship of your exhibition making to the context of the Marble Room, but also the role of representation in your model? For example, the selection of colors, the inversion of that relationship as well. Yeah.
Sure, sure. That's actually that has been that was the first question I think that was asked by Michael when I first proposed this idea. I guess he interrogated everyone who would do anything in the marble room of this question. How are you going to deal with the marble room? I actually wasn't quite clear at the very beginning of the process of designing this show. The only let's say image that I had in my head back then was a very, very vague one, which was more like a personality of the show. So I was telling myself that I wanted this show to have this personality that is quiet, that is subtle, but also rich. I don't know back then I didn't know what that would turn out to be, both form-wise and also material-wise. But then along the way, I kind of developed along many of the, the seminar teaching and the conversations, I developed into this relatively abstract formal language of the model, and also, if you will, the almost minimum presence of material and color. So in terms of the let's say the spatial grade that I constructed within the model as a response to the floor pattern. As far as I know, I was told that I'm the first one that dealt with the floor pattern in the marble room. So I'm happy that I did it because the honest reason behind that was because I just found it was really hard to deal with the marble surface. With any kind of architectural formal material intervention at all in the scale of an exhibition. So, and also a more practical reason was that it was during the pandemic. I had to be practical in terms of the amount of the work and labor I can manage for the entire production. This model and everything existed way beyond my my plan and expectation in terms of workload and labor, but already, so that part really kind of all the factors contributed to the final manifestation of the material, and let's say the setup of the model. And in terms of the color, I don't want to say too much about the color. I think it's more of a aesthetic decision to me, so I wanted to maybe keep that to your experience. And as you can probably tell now, already it's only basically just two colors, white and copper. And the reason why copper, it's, I guess, again, white is something that I guess for me a representation of non-material kind of color. Whereas copper for me is something that is so specific, so materially rich color, and it implies the metal, the kind of reflection, everything that really kind of intrigued me, the kind of contrast between the non-material color and a very materially rich color. And I just personally like that aesthetics, putting together a model using only two colors. Also, it was a constraint that I set up for myself to present the whole idea without using too many colors, too many distractions. Yeah, I guess I hope that responded to your question.
Okay, thank you, Liang. Thank you,
Thank you, Liang.
Thank you, Liang. Professor Wang told me that he would only answer 3 questions. So only 3, but only if they're good questions. Do we have any questions from the audience? Associate Dean Zerniak gets to ask the first question. The students should get to go first, yes. You're right. Ivan will ask a question.
Thank you for the amazing speech.
Thank you.
And I have a question associated with the exhibition and also the Superblock. So the Superblock has always been associated with a utopian vision of architects and social activists trying to intervene or build a city or a community that regulates every people. Like they expect people to live in that block to their expectation, but like from your observation, it's too ambitious and it's impossible for architects to see all. So can we understand it as like we should admit the limitation of architects trying to intervene this society? And then I haven't really like see the model. So from my understanding, this model is also attempt to achieve the impossible like superblock or create a like superblock. Well, yeah, to design a superblock. So how does your reasoning and theory negotiate this maybe conflict? Or yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the very rich question. It's also a challenging one. So I think the first part of your question has to do with, let's say, the operation of the superblock as a kind of practice, if I get it right. And I would say that, or how we can go from here, right, by acknowledging the limit of the impossibility of the superblock. I would say, for me personally, I always regard myself as a designer who happens to be very interested in history and theory. I would say that by acknowledging that limit or impossibility is itself already an opportunity for us to operate upon, which is why I think it's just critically important to acknowledge, first of all, that impossibility. And only after that, then you can start to really speculate what could be the alternative of that. And I think by having that limitation or setting up that constraints for yourself is, for me, always a kind of interesting and constructive way of starting thinking about design and design operations. And secondly, I think, sorry, remind me your question again? Like your projects, right?
Is actually this model, the purpose of this model, like, is it to achieve the superblock? Like you said, it's impossible, but this model is attempting to. Yeah.
I think maybe in one sentence to answer your question is this model is exactly the representation, design representation and spatial representation, if you will, of that, let's say, resistance. On the one hand, by acknowledging the impossibility of seeing the all or the totality of the city. But on the other hand, this model, I guess, is, for me, is trying to say that we should not stop. We should always keep looking for alternatives as designers. I think that's our responsibilities. But maybe not from the passes that already taken from the modernists in terms of this totalization approach, but rather something else by looking maybe in a more nuanced context or cultural or social geographical fabrics. Yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Ivan. One more question, and then Professor Zerniak has a question. Unless there's not another question, but there must be. Yes.
Hello. So I wanted to ask, in terms of what I can see from the model, when you were making the model, did you picture the superblock as something that could be like stacked on top of each other, or like infinitely built up or tiled up, or did you only perceive of the superblock as something that would like infinitely expand like on an XY axis, but never like up?
That's a good question. Okay.
Oh, I apologize.
Please.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't speaking into the mic loud enough. I was gonna, what I asked was, when he was designing the model, did he picture the superblock as something that could be stacked on top of itself or like infinitely expanded up, or was it only something that could expand like on an XY axis, like planarly?
So Actually, from here, you can see basically two views. One is, or two, if you will, two objects or entities. One is the kind of a complexity in the middle part, right? That towers and everything in the model. And the other is a white frame. So for me, I call the inner part, where you see all the towers at an urban scale, that is a kind of idealized superblock that has a very implicit relationship to the Asian Chinese planning idea or plan. And then the outer frame, the white or shelf, if you will, serves as both a visual screen for you to see the backdrop, the urban view. At the same time, it also itself is a building. And one tiny detail I suspect that you guys will find out, but I will just spout it out. This larger wide frame is the enlarged version of one smaller building that you will find in the superblock. So there is this kind of montage kind of experience that I'm playing with. I wouldn't say that the inner part, the urban scale model, is itself the entirety of the superblock, but rather I think this model itself. Because for me, it's not about creating, let's say, an urban fabric that is my idealized version or imagination of the superblock, but rather I think for me is to have that imagination and also to show that resistance and impossibility, which is only achieved by the outer frame that you will see. Yeah.
Okay, one more question. Could I just make a quick observation and say, at least it's my understanding that Liang has not made a superblock. In a way, the model and the entire exhibition is staging the question of what the superblock ambition is. So this is not a model of a superblock. This is a model of the question of what is the superblock. Would that be accurate?
Yes, fair enough.
Good. One last question, because you want to open the show. You want to see the model.
I know. I'll make it fast. Everyone's getting impatient. First of all, thank you both for your comments. My question might be irrelevant, but I'm going to ask it, and you can just say no. Which is, you spoke about the Superblock both as a project, as an imaginary, as an exhibition, relative to kind of nested scales and disciplines, the city, architecture, even the interior. And I'm wondering in your research if landscape ever figured into the discourse, right? Landscape is always the other, the background, the forgotten. Did it ever come up?
Actually, yes, it did in our research seminar, where we had several case studies, interestingly not from the Western context, but from the Chinese context, where the spatial appreciation or let's say, the schema of viewing or conceiving space is totally different from, let's say, the Western perspective, where landscape and built environment or built space are relatively separated. But in the case that we look at in China, the two things are always together, almost from every scale, from the urban to the nature, if you will, to the planetary nature, and then to even how a house is constructed and conceived. And I think that's maybe related to your question. It's something I really wanted to take on, because that's one possibility going forward, to say that maybe there is an alternative path for what's already existed that has been proven to be impossible or failed. That has really to do with how you conceive the relationship between the certain built space and environment versus the landscape, or the idea of themselves. So thank you, Julia.
Okay, Lean, any final comments before we open the show?
I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
And
Okay, So, Liang, you know, a show
my turn?
opening means that you can
Okay,
open the
I'm
show.
excited. I waited for so long. Okay, so I did clear that the...
Also, if this view over here, you can get, if you use the QR code on the outside. Use your phone, take a photo, you get a QR code.